Welcome to the Emotional Eating Unwrapped podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, an emotional eating and weight loss coach for women looking to fall in love with eating, create healthy attachments with food, and lose weight sustainably. Hello, and welcome back to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and today's episode is for the woman who has done all the work, right? You feel like you've done all the work, you've read all the books, you've tried all the plans, you've downloaded the apps, but you still find yourself stuck in the same eating patterns that you promised yourself you believed that you would be free from at this point. And maybe if you're being really honest with yourself, you have been running in this circle for a really long time, right? This hamster wheel for a really long time. And then if you take the lid off of the frustration, and this is where we're going to go today, we're going to take the lid off of the frustration and we're going to take a look a little bit deeper and realize that it didn't start with you. It didn't start with you. The guilt, the shame, the rules, right? The belief that food needs to be earned, that hunger is scary or suspicious or unreliable, that pleasure needs to be justified, eating something delicious and sweet needs to be justified. It started way earlier than you, way earlier than when you entered into this hamster wheel. Before you even had words for it, watching your mom skip meals potentially, hearing your grandmother call second helpings bad habits or, some sort of problem, right? Seeing love and control get served up on the same plate of food, right? Judgment, love, all intertwined in one. Because today we're going to be talking about the mother-daughter food cycle. Right. And it doesn't have to be literal mother-daughter. It's really about our female influences in our lives. So if you didn't grow up in a traditional mother-daughter environment, you can relate this to women that were your role models. So this can be literal for some, not literal for others, but just think about the way that the narratives of the women in your life might have influenced your entry into this hamster wheel. Because our relationship with food and our bodies, it didn't just begin in adulthood, right? We might be living it out in our adulthood, but it didn't begin in adulthood. It was shaped in kitchens, in silence, in different generations that were trying to survive, right? In a world obsessed with fitness and control and maybe even scarcity. Right? So if you've ever thought, why is this still so hard for me? I want you to zoom out. And, zooming out, I often say, makes things a lot easier to feel like they're healable. So I want you to zoom out and realize that maybe it's not just yours to carry. Maybe it's inherited. But maybe, just maybe, you are the one who gets to end the cycle. Okay, so let's get into today's episode. We're going to chat first we're going to talk about the inheritance that you possibly didn't even know you were carrying, because most of us weren't explicitly taught how to eat. Right? We weren't taught how to eat high nutritional food, right? We weren't taught how to nourish our bodies and also feel good about eating. And, a lot of us weren't taught these things. Right? We weren't taught how to feel about food, how to relate to our bodies, right? We weren't taught it, but we absorbed it. Right? We absorbed it through comments, through glances, through how the women around us treated their own bodies, how they talked to themselves. Maybe you remember your mom or a woman figure in your life always ordering a salad when she really wanted something else, right? Nothing's wrong with salads, but we kind of created this narrative around salads because of the motivation behind it, right? Maybe the women that you looked up to in your life weighed themselves daily or saved up calories before a big meal, right? You heard them talk about it like that, or maybe you saw her pinch herself in the mirror, pinch her stomach or thighs, whatever, in the mirror and sigh, right? Some negative thing. Body language is so important, right? Like oftentimes we learn more from what is unsaid, right? We learn more through tone. So not necessarily unsaid, but we learn more through tone, through sometimes unspoken language like body language. Maybe food in your experience for the women that were role models for you, maybe it was really complicated. Maybe they use food to soothe, to celebrate, to avoid, right? There was always some emotional charge around food and some explanation and some desired emotional result for why they were eating, but it was rarely ever neutral. And so even if it is your mom, or, even if the woman role model in your life was deeply loving, she was also likely swimming in the same really murky waters of diet culture that you're now trying to climb out of. So, of course, you picked up beliefs and self-talk, negative self-talk. Of course, you picked up food noise, like finish everything on your plate. You've been good today, you deserve a treat, right? Oh, that food is bad. That's bad. That's like bad for you. This is a quote unquote clean food, right? Like labeling foods, right? These are the kind of messages, verbal and nonverbal, that gets stored in your nervous system. And it's not because there's some sort of malfunction in you. It's just because you were trained to believe that food equals value, that weight equals worth. This is what you were trained on a subconscious emotional level. Okay, so now let's fast forward, right? How these beliefs show up in your relationship with food, right? You're grown now. You're an adult woman. Maybe even you have kids of your own. Maybe you've gone through different seasons of your relationship with your food and your body. Maybe you've done macros and keto and Whole30 and juice fasts and, lots of rules, structure, restriction, followed by seasons of chaos, right? Maybe you've done intuitive eating. I think that's chaotic, right? The intuitive eating as a diet program, right? Maybe you've done all that. Maybe you've done it more than once. And now maybe you're tired of the seesaw, swinging between all in and starting over on Monday. And you're thinking, because now you're like this adult woman, you have this great job, you have it together in so many other areas of your life, you have your own children, and you're like, why is this still running my life? Right? Like, why is this still running my life? But here is the truth. Here's the thing. When food is layered, when it's layered with shame, when it's layered with your identity, when it's layered with legacy, it's never just about the food. And so you might have not realized it before this episode. Hopefully now you're realizing it. But the habits and the behaviors and the obsession and the constant noise in your brain, the anxiety that you struggle with today in this moment, right? The binging, the emotional overeating, the obsessing over your body, they're often echoes of what was modeled for you, even if it was unintentional. Okay, we're not going to assume that anybody did this intentionally, because like we said, this is often really generational and influenced by culture too. So maybe your mom or the female figure in your life, or it might have even been your dad, right? Like it might have even been a male figure. I'm not even just going to say this is always just women, because it can also be men. right? So maybe no one ever said you needed to lose weight, but you watched them fight with their own body every single day, right? Maybe no one ever told you explicitly not to trust your hunger, but every woman in your life taught you through their actions that it wasn't to be trusted. This is how food becomes emotional, even before you ever have the language to say that you're an emotional eater. But the thing is, once it becomes emotional, it evolves. It becomes protective. It becomes something that feels overpowering. And that's what makes this cycle so hard to break, because it's not just personal. It's really generational. I remember what it felt like to be stuck in the cycle of emotional eating. I tried every diet out there, counting, tracking, restricting, but nothing ever worked. Food controlled my life, my thoughts, and I constantly felt guilty after eating. But once I learned how to heal the emotional triggers behind my eating and trust my body, everything changed. I stopped obsessing over food, the weight started coming off naturally, and I found real freedom in how I ate and lived. So, I created the Sober Eating year-long mentorship to help other women experience the same transformation. So you can stop battling with food, you can lose weight without deprivation, and you can feel confident in your body again. In this mentorship, you'll have access to my proven nervous system rewiring method. You'll have access to live coaching with me, weekly accountability, and a community of women who truly understand your journey. You'll also have free access to my signature programs, the Emotional Eating Solution and Decoding Permanent Weight Loss, valued at $2,000. Click the link in the show notes to explore the mentorship today. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be right there with you every step of the way. You know, when we talk about like the inner workings of the food relationship with women as role models and young women, young girls. Okay, so I'm going to say the mother-daughter relationship, but again, it's like older, more adult women kind of modeling a relationship with food and eating for younger girls. Right? Food is rarely neutral. Right? It's the rare occurrence where it's just like normal. Right? It's often how love is expressed. Right? It's often how control is expressed. It's often how expectations are reinforced. And this is, you know, it's often weaponized, right? Like, it's often weaponized for a teaching moment, right? Like, there's just ways that food is used that isn't neutral, right? Maybe food was connection in your home. And this is, you know, this is complicated because food as connection is lovely. But maybe with that connection came some commentary, like, don't have too many of those, or do you really need more of that? Or the constant undertone of, you know, your body is being watched. And if your mom or if the woman role model in your life was always chasing a smaller version of herself, you likely learned to chase that too. I mean, obviously, right? It's like, obviously, that is just how human animals are. Right? So even if you've outgrown her exact habit, the emotional imprint may still be playing out in your adult life. Okay, and this isn't about blame. I'm not blaming anybody here. This is like, I'm just kind of speaking neutrally here. Okay, so this isn't about blaming her, whoever her is in your life. It's about understanding the system that she herself was trapped in and now recognizing that you are now an adult and have the agency to decide whether you want to keep following its rules. Right? This system. So, what do you want to do with all this, right? Now that we've talked about this, how do we break the cycle without the pressure to get it perfect, because that is key, right? So how do we break the cycle without the pressure to get it perfect? How do you start untangling these beliefs and imprints that were handed to you long before you could even consent to them? How do you do this? And so you do this by noticing. You start by noticing. Noticing when your food guilt starts to feel like someone else's voice. Noticing when you start restricting, not because you want to, but because it feels like it's what you should do. Noticing how often your inner critic sounds just like the women who were your models. And then bit by bit, you rewrite the script. Bit by bit. You give yourself permission to eat for satisfaction, not approval, not perfection, not to do it right. You move your body not to punish it or to burn calories or to earn food. You do your best to raise your children to see food as neutral, not moral. You don't need to swing to any extreme here, right? You don't need to get this perfect, but you do need to make it yours. Because the real shift happens when you stop asking, what would make me acceptable? What would make me lovable? What would make me worthy? And you realize that you already are. And the question is, what would make me whole? What would make me whole? And so before we end, I just want to sum it up by reminding you that healing your relationship with food, healing emotional eating, body image, self-worth, self-love, it's not just about changing what's on your plate. It's about releasing the parts of your story that never belonged to you in the first place. And I'm not going to lie to you, this work is hard. It's hard. It takes time. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in a flash. It might take a couple of months. I always give the example that it takes 9 months to grow a child inside of us and then birth a child that, is helpless and has to grow, right? So if we want to birth a new version of ourselves, I always say that to expect it's going to be less than 9 months, especially if we've been alive for 20 something, 30 something, 40 something, 50 something, 60 something years, it's totally unrealistic, right? So be prepared for it to be a process. But realize that every time you choose acceptance and softness over shame, presence over perfection, right? Like the process over being perfect, you're creating something new. And you're not just breaking patterns, you're building trust. This is the act of building trust. I get that question all the time too. Like, how do I trust my body? This is it. Right? You're building trust with your body, with your hunger, with your voice, right? So here's to being the one who stops the cycle, right? Not because you have to fix your family, right? Not because, for no one else but you. Because you're finally choosing to take care of yourself, okay? So that's all I have today. Really excited to hear what you guys think of this episode. You can always leave comments on Spotify and even on Apple, I believe, to share with us what you think about the episode. And if you are loving the podcast, I love releasing these podcast episodes for you. Please follow us. Please like us. It really helps get our podcast out there. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.